Today we get into the Port Arthur mass shooting that occurred on the 28th of April 1996. In case you've been avoiding the news since the 90s, this tragic event resulted in the death of 35 people and left 23 injured. It changed Australia forever. There was a massive amnesty of firearms and ultimately the people of Australia were disarmed and the law was changed to penalise those that didn't abide by the new gun laws very harshly. Australia really was changed forever. And considering it was by far the worst mass shooting in Australian history, we know very little in reality. You would think they would disclose all evidence and all documents, etc., but that is not the case. All documents and evidence in relation to the Port Arthur Seascape Massacre was sealed from public view for 25 years. Now that 25 years came up in 2021, but don't get excited, there was an application made to extend that for another 75 years. Meaning we won't be able to view any documents or evidence related to the Port Arthur Massacre until 2096, when all of us are dead and buried in the ground. Now, Port Arthur isn't just a tourist spot known for its eerie ruins and convict ghost stories. It's where tragedy struck when Martin Bryant allegedly opened fire on innocent tourists and staff at Port Arthur. But who is Martin? Well, Martin Bryant is a Tasmanian bloke with surfy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. Not exactly the brightest crayon in the box, but smart enough to befriend Helen Harvey, the eccentric sole heir to the Tattersalls' rumoured $29 million fortune. Yes, you heard me right. $29 million. They became fast mates with a friendship that seemed rather unconventional to say the least. But they cared for each other very deeply and spent the majority of their time together. Martin eventually moving into her Newtown property with her. They'd go on shopping sprees and drives, but there was a habit of Martin's that concerned Helen. When she'd be driving, sometimes Martin would grab the steering wheel and yank it, causing her to swerve all over the road. She was concerned that it could cause an accident. The vision was spot on. Helen Harvey died in an accident where her vehicle swerved into the middle of the road and hit an oncoming car. Martin was a passenger in the vehicle and sustained neck injuries, but recovered. He inherited an undisclosed amount and rumour the majority of Helen's estate. One thing the Australian media all left out at the time was that Martin Bryant is a very, very rich man. About 10 years ago, I had a very intriguing conversation with an ex-SAS officer. You know, the don't ask, don't tell kind of type. Well, he got all riled up and started telling me a few things. And he said there is no way any civilian could have taken those shots that were taken at Port Arthur on the day of the Port Arthur Massacre. No way at all. And let's not ignore the fact that the AR-15 used allegedly slipped out of the Victoria Police's evidence locker, just like a magician pulls a rabbit out of his hat. How the hell does a gun that was handed into Victoria Police turn up in the hands of an alleged mass murderer 10 years later on? But that conversation I had with the SAS soldier, in my opinion, was confirmation, in my opinion, to a rumour, and a very strong rumour for that matter, that an elite SAS unit was responsible for the shooting at Port Arthur. That unit was even specifically named. But coincidentally and tragically, around a week after the events at Port Arthur, the entire unit were killed in a Black Hawk helicopter crash in a remote part of Queensland near Townsville. So none of those SAS soldiers were able to ever be interviewed or questioned in regards to these rumours that they were responsible for the events at Port Arthur. Seems far too convenient to me. This has absolutely blown my mind. There can't possibly be these many coincidences. But there's actually more facts to question the official narrative. Lots more. To make it all just a little more hard to believe Martin is a mass murderer, let's talk about the witnesses. Out of 200, only 2 identified Martin as the shooter. There were several people who were at Port Arthur and witnessed the shooting who knew Martin and his family, like witness Jim Laycock, the cafe owner, who was 2 feet away from the shooter and knew Martin as a little boy, and says Martin was not the one pulling the trigger. Wendy, another local, echoes the same sentiment. So what gives? After all the attempts made by police to coerce their narrative to witnesses, Witnesses still contest the official story. Another witness, an ex-Vietnam soldier named John Godfrey, insisted that the guy on front of every paper was not the shooter. Graham Collier, shot at point-blank range, was adamant Martin wasn't the shooter either. But guess what? The cops didn't want to hear from him. And then there's the infamous Seascape cottages. The fire that engulfed them wasn't even Martin's doing. No, it was the police firing illuminating rounds that lit the place up like a bloody Christmas tree. It's also been suggested Martin wasn't alone. He claimed to be with a mate named Rick at the Seascape cottages. Gunshots were heard when Martin was on the phone to a detective, meaning Martin could not have been the one firing the gun. So he can't have been alone. There's a whole lot more with this so-called Rick. Who he is, was he the second shooter? But that's a whole other story on its own. Let me just say there are questions and associations with the military and the police. So, what do we take from this? The more we dig, the more it just seems like the truth is buried right along there with the evidence locked away for 75 years. Don't know about you guys, but red flags are everywhere on this, and it feels very much like a conspiracy. There's way too many unanswered questions. Way too many. The people of Australia want answers, and the Sick Cunt Collective demands full disclosure. Australians want to know what happened in Tasmania on the darkest day in Australian history. So, sick cunts, what are your thoughts? Do you think Martin did it, or do you think he's innocent? So many unanswered questions, but please feel free to drop comments in the comments section below and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear everybody else's opinions. If you want to see some more stuff on Port Arthur and Martin, then there is a fantastic series sort of thingy on YouTube called The Wasp Files. It's really, really great, really fantastic. I advise everybody to get out there and have a look at that too. Anyway, sick cunts, I hope you've had a fantastic, entertaining journey with me, and we'll catch up next time. Thanks, sick cunts.